Hello and welcome to another live stream with the Butler. Now, today my main theme is discretion. So, what do I mean by discretion? Well, I mean the butler's ability and requirement to stay discreet. Now, that might seem like the easiest thing in the world because staying discreet is simply a matter of not saying anything. But realistically, it's more than just not saying anything. It's about what to say, what not to say, when to react, and when you shouldn't react. Now, of course, this isn't just for butlers. This would be equally true of, well, almost anyone, to be honest, but especially people who work in, shall we say, customer-facing roles. We are often in the vicinity of people and they are living their daily lives. It's really important to know when we should interact with that and when we shouldn't. For example, if two people are having a private joke, it's better to step away from that than it is to laugh in their private joke, because it's private. By definition, you're not part of it. So I'm using the television in the hotel as a key light. Which I thought was incredibly clever and but yeah, no, it's okay. It's come back on. It timed out. So as I'm saying, discretion, there's a big difference between being part of a conversation and hearing a conversation. So as a simple rule, if you are not part of a conversation, then you should at least act like you are not hearing the conversation. Now, obviously, we can't literally turn off our ears. When we're in the room, we can't physically not hear what people are saying because obviously we are in the room. But it is important we don't react to it. We don't giggle, we don't look shocked. I wouldn't giggle anyway, but you know what I mean. We don't react to what's happening. Now, this is sometimes easier than others. Another example of this is chauffeurs. Now, over the years, I've had a lot of feedback from guests that they haven't been happy with the interactions between them and their chauffeurs. And I found it confusing, and I was asking exactly what the problem was. And quite often the problem is quite unfair to the chauffeurs, but I can also understand it from the point of view of the principal or the principal's guests. And that is that the chauffeur is interacting with the conversation that they are having in the back of the car. So let's imagine this, it's a husband and wife having a conversation in the back of the car about a subject, and then the chauffeur chimes in with their opinion on that subject. The only time you do that is when the person in the back of the car asks your opinion. And even then, it's very important to give a guarded opinion. Don't be overly political or overly divisive in what you say. Also, don't just try to be sycophantic to the person who is in the back, the person that you are talking to, because that also comes across as not very genuine. If you just say, oh yes, I absolutely 100% agree with everything you say, then that as well doesn't always seem genuine. So you need to get a good balance between not disagreeing with them, but also maybe not too wholeheartedly agreeing. I tend to use terms like, that's very interesting, sir, but it's not really something that I know anything about. And that's kind of a conversation closer, especially if they're talking about, religion, politics, any personal matters. It's best not to become a part of that conversation. Now, obviously, those of you who watch my channel regularly will know that I sometimes tell stories, and I sometimes tell stories about my guests. But there's a couple of really important things to remember when I do that. I either make sure there is no way that you could know who that guest was, so I'll speak vaguely about a situation, but I'll make sure there's no names, and I may well change the location and the timeline just to be really, really careful and really, really sure that you can't somehow work out who I'm talking about, because I guess if someone was really tenacious, they could go back through social media records, see what celebrities or what powerful people were in a particular place at a time, and try and sort of work your way back to a conclusion about who I was talking about. Now, you still would probably have the wrong person, but at least if I'm changing some of the details, the chance of you working out who the actual person is would be almost 1,000,000 to 1. It'd be practically impossible. Or I will talk about situations where I've been given permission from the person I'm talking about to talk about it. And then, of course, that is a very different situation. If in doubt, don't say anything. There's also a level of security risk within the sort of idea of being discreet. So, for example, where I used to live in central London, there's a few lovely, lovely pubs which are in the back streets between the mansions. I lived in Belgravia, and the beautiful thing about Belgravia is it was made for staff and aristocrats. So it's like two towns built on top of another. So you've got the first town, which is Belgrave Square, and all these incredibly grand mansions. And they're very beautiful, they're very open, they're very airy, they have trees around them. And then directly behind these beautiful mansions, you have these incredible narrow cobbled streets. And they're lined with these little terraced houses. They're a little bit dark, and most of the terraced houses at least were shops. Very few of them are shops now, which is unfortunate, because even these little dark terraced houses are worth like £4 or £5 million in today's market. But there was a time that these little cobbled streets were where all the working class people that looked after the aristocrats lived, and there'd have been shops in the lower half of these little houses, and then of course the people would have lived in the floor above. I lived in one of these houses, and to me, I just loved the history of it. I was looking at these little shops that once were and have been converted into houses, or maybe very sort of fancy boutiques selling Louis Vuitton, or well, actually no, the Louis Vuitton shop was around the corner, but the Christian Louboutin shop and stuff was on one of these kind of small houses. And it's a far cry from what it would have been, which would have been candle makers and butchers and cobblers and all these other sort of trades that would have kind of been ancillary to the aristocrats, and it's how the working class people would have made their money. And obviously, to go with all these tradespeople, what did you have on every street corner? And that was a pub. Those of you who are not sort of, don't know the sort of British tradition of the pub, it's very much a part of British culture. It's not just a bar, it's a sort of hub of a community. So all of these people for the last 200-300 years would have frequented these pubs on these little street corners, and nothing has changed. To this day, if you go into one of those pubs on a Friday night, what you'll actually see is a fascinating mix of butlers, housekeepers, chauffeurs, but also millionaires and people who are working in all the boutiques, and it's a real mixing pot of people. But when it comes to discretion, sometimes sitting in the pub, I would get talking to other butlers and things like that, and I would hear them speaking much too freely about those clients that they look after, sharing way too much personal information. They'd be saying things like, oh, my employer's such a slob, my employer leaves this and that, or my employer had these girls over last night, or whatever they're talking about. Now, they think they're being discreet enough because they're under the impression that I don't know who their employer is. They are taking the time and care not to say their employer's name, even after a few pints of beer. They're still taking that time not to share who that employer, who might have had maybe a couple of ladies of ill repute around the night before or whatever. They're not foolish enough to say their name. But the problem is, the other people who are not fools are newspaper reporters. So newspaper reporters will also frequent these pubs, get chatting, buy drinks for these members of staff, and in a conversation, they will hear these stories. They will also, of course, especially in today's world of social media, etc., it could be quite easy to work out who someone works for. All you need is a photograph of them going into the building they work, or if they're really in extreme circumstance, they can even follow them, see which building they go in, and then finding out what who owns that property is relatively easy. So it's important not to say anything from a point of view of security. Also, I'm talking about newspaper reporters, but that's not the only danger. That's a danger to reputation. But it's also worth pointing out that as butlers, a lot of the people that we look after are actually in danger through physical acts. If you're wealthy enough to have a butler, then you're wealthy enough to have enemies. Having enemies does not mean that you're not a good person. It's not like good people don't have enemies and bad people do. Being wealthy and powerful, by definition, will get you enemies. Now, these enemies might just be, as they say, haters. They might be people who just want to discredit you, people who want to badmouth you in the press, or much more seriously, they could be terrorists, they could be hackers, they could be thieves, robbers. These are all people that we need as butlers and as household staff to protect our principals from. Now, how do we protect them? Well, we protect them not physically. We're not Kevin Costner. We're not going to be sort of running around with guns trying to take out bad guys. Far from it. We are using this and this to protect them. We're keeping this closed and we're keeping this engaged. We want to look out for any strange characters hanging about. We want to be cognitive enough that if someone's asking us a lot of questions, yes, they might just be interested in our job and what we do, or much more seriously, they might be wanting to do harm to the people we work for, and that would very possibly involve doing harm to us as well. Because let's imagine it is some sort of attack upon the person we work for, be under no false apprehension that if someone wants to do harm to your employer, that they wouldn't, without hesitation, go through you to do so, and there'd be equal danger to you as to them, possibly even more danger. So discretion is very important. Now, I've spoken a while about this from the point of view of a private butler, but the exact same is true for a hotel butler. Now, I train a lot of hotel butlers. I'm right now in the Caribbean doing, well, actually today I'm not doing butler training. Today I'm doing front of house training, but you know, I'm usually doing butler training. As a hotel butler, you are again privy to the personal lives of a lot of people. You are privy to the personal lives of people that trust you. Now, to be a good hotel butler, you need to create trust in an incredibly short amount of time. It's a very difficult thing. This is one of the reasons why in my training, I always say to my butlers, make sure you have as many face-to-face connections with your guests as you can. You can't build trust through WhatsApp messages. You certainly can't build trust through automated, dear, insert guest name here. Please let me know if you need me to provide anything to your room, etc., etc. That demonstrates a service and that shares what you are prepared to do, but it by no means builds trust. And when you think about it, if someone's staying in a hotel, it is essential that they have a level of trust to those whom are serving them. So I'm staying here in this lovely hotel. Now I'm staying here on my own, sadly, because my wife and family couldn't join me on this trip. Children have school, my wife has work, etc., etc. So I'm staying on my own. But let's imagine if I was staying here with my wife and family. What would that look like? Well, that would mean that any members of staff serving us would be privy to everything that we're doing. You know, if you're in the room, and of course my wife and I never argue, obviously, but if hypothetically we were arguing and you were serving us, you would be hearing that argument. If our children were misbehaving, and actually I can honestly, even more honestly say that genuinely my children never seem to misbehave, and that's something I'm very grateful for, and I will thank them for that every day. But if they were, then again, the member of staff is privy to that and will be inclined to make judgments. And then let's think about this in a discretion point of view. Might they pass that judgment on to others? Might they go back and start talking about all the behavior of room 4450 or something like that? Okay? But they must not do so. That's the important part of this. You might think it's purely a harmless little tale that you're telling your friends, but it's very important that you do not pass on personal information of any kind about your guests to anyone else, because doing so is a breach of trust. Someone agreeing for you to work for them as their butler, even if it's just for a few nights in a hotel, you are engaging in a covenant of trust with them. And that's something that you must not break. Now, I'm going to caveat this particular statement that I'm saying because I feel confident I know what someone's going to comment at this point. There's probably someone actually hovering over the keyboard right this second about to type this. And what you're going to type is, what about if the person is breaking the law? That's completely different. If a person is breaking the law, it is them who has broken the covenant of trust, not you. Because a covenant is not a one-sided thing. You, as the member of staff, are agreeing to be discreet. You're agreeing to look after them. But them, as your guest, are agreeing to not put you in a situation where you are unable to fulfill that. And obviously, if they are breaking the law, by definition, they are the ones breaking the covenant. This could be a big thing or it could be a small thing. Now, guests can sometimes, for example, let's say it's a no-smoking hotel, which most hotels these days are. With the exception of a few countries, most hotels are non-smoking. Let's say our guest wants to smoke in their room. And maybe our guest gives you $200 to keep quiet about the fact that they're smoking in their room. Maybe they give you $300 and tell you to buy them cigarettes. Whatever. Now, under those circumstances, you have both broken the covenant of trust. The guest has broken a covenant of trust with the hotel, and so have you, because of your actions. If, imagine literally the worst happened and that guest who was smoking in their room set fire to the room, the hotel set on fire and someone was seriously hurt or killed, think about the consequences of that. I'm not even talking about the consequences of someone finding out you were involved. I'm more talking about the consequences of how you would feel afterwards knowing that you were complicit within that. Definitely not worth $200. And that's just an example, and it's an example that could happen. So discretion is important, but not when someone is breaking the law or breaking the rules. Okay. Should be drinking this coffee. I think it's getting cold. I always hate these little lids because they don't let enough air out to let the coffee, no, enough air in to let the coffee out, if you know what I mean. That's better. Much better. Now, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know that Alex messaged me before the beginning of this with a list of questions. And I said to him, please send them through in the live chat because I haven't got my laptop here right now, so I can't read the questions from the message at the same time as doing the live stream. So Alex, if you're watching, please feel free to send those messages through. I don't want to not answer your questions, but obviously right now, I don't know what they are. So please feel free to send any messages through. But until then, I will continue to talk about the importance of discretion. Now, what about our lives as a butler makes us different from almost any other career in the world? Well, that's exactly this. That is our access to the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world. One of the most interesting things in my career as a butler is the fact that I have met, I can honestly tell you, I have lost count of the amount of presidents and prime ministers that I have met. I'd probably, if I concentrated, be able to tot up the amount of royalty that I've met, but it's still quite a high number. Presidents and prime ministers, I have met so many that I'm literally trying to calculate in my head right now, and it's many. And I have been, as we say, privy to a lot of conversations that most people don't get to hear. I remember one time, this was many years ago, there was a group of, I can say world leaders, because these were literally leaders, prime ministers and stuff of European countries, so powerful countries. And they had a closed meeting with security at the door. And we were given the brief that no one goes in. Of course, I would follow that brief to the letter and make sure that no one went in. I then get, during this meeting, I actually get a text message. This was before WhatsApp. I get a text message from one of the guests who was a prime minister of a European country, asking for espresso. So I make an espresso, of course, do what I'm told, and take it to the door and say, he has asked me to bring this espresso in. Show it to the policeman on the door. Obviously, the policeman's been told not to let anyone in, which is, of course, his job, and I understand that. So he says, just wait a second, and he does go in and check that this is all above board and correct, comes out and says, in you go. So I go in and I serve him, and of course I don't hang around. All I'm doing is putting the espresso and a glass of water and stuff down in front of him, and then oh no, I didn't need a glass of water, there's already one on the table actually, come to think of it. So it's literally just the espresso, and then leave. So I'm not in there for very long. But what I did notice just in that short time, that they did not, and of course it makes sense, why would they? They did not stop their conversation. They did not stop this closed meeting. You know, I could still see what was the presentation and everything like that. And that demonstrates a level of trust to the butler. Now, of course, I had no interest in all these things they were talking about. They meant nothing to me. And I can't even remember what the meeting was about, to be absolutely honest with you. And that's kind of the point. I did not keep this meeting to my memory. I did not be nosy. I was not trying to look at anything. I just did my job and I left. Now, the other part of discretion is about when guests deliberately try and bait you, or they ask you open-ended questions where they're trying to get a reaction or an argument from you. This is a difficult situation, and again, it's happened to me many times. People will deliberately ask you inflammatory questions, or at least questions they think are going to be inflammatory. I remember one guest constantly trying to coax me on religion. He was trying to get me to, well, I believe he was trying to actively get me to sort of disagree with him. He was saying more and more sort of extreme things about how much better his religion was and stuff like that. Completely unnecessary. And I believe, well, I know that he was trying to do it to get a reaction from me. Interestingly, he was a guest of my employer, and my employer, in no uncertain terms, literally told him to stop doing it. He said, stop being rude to my staff. what you're doing. But of course, the point is I did not react to any of his comments or anything like that, because there's nothing in it for me to react. I was literally just saying things along the lines of, I wouldn't really know about that, sir. I'm not an expert in religion, sir, so I wouldn't know how to comment on that question and things like that. I kept it very, very vague. Recently, again, you know, I've seen this a few times when people are in a similar way. They're talking about either, you know, from the US, talking about Democrats and Republicans. Now, nothing to do with me. As long as this sort of stuff stays within your own country, it does not affect me. I have no interest in taking sides because they're not the people who are in charge of me. None of my business. Like I say, keep it within your own country, guys. But other than that, but that is the kind of debates that people will try and get out of you. And the important thing to remember is there's no point debating things because you're never going to change someone's mind. It's such a pointless task. Let's imagine one group of people love political party A and the other group of people love political party B. Now, no matter how good an orator you are, no matter how intelligent and well thought out your answers are, one thing I guarantee you is that if you were either A or B, you would be immensely unlikely to convince any of the people who were A to move to B or any of the people who were B to move to A. Okay? Simple as that. So why bother trying? You are there to do a job. It's a highly skilled job. You don't need to worry about all these other things. Be discreet, keep your opinions to yourself, and let that be an end of it. If you wish to talk about things when you're not being a butler, that's of course totally different. But still be careful, because if you choose to express your opinions on social media and things like that, remember that these opinions will continue and will still exist long after you've posted them, and they may well exist after you've changed your mind. You could say today that you're a huge fan of this particular political person, and in 6 weeks' time, you might find out that they've done horrible, terrible things. Or 6 years' time, you might find out that they've done horrible, terrible things. And someone will dig up that video of you saying you think they're an absolutely wonderful person. Now, you in good faith said that before you knew about these terrible things they've done, but it will reflect on you in the future. So, easier said than done, I know, and I've fallen into this trap myself, but try as a butler not to voice any opinions about anybody. I mean, I'm quite lucky now because I don't work as a private butler anymore. I run this company and I provide butlers and I work as a butler, but not to one client. So these dangers do not really apply to me as much as they did, but it's still just a sound, good logic to live by. Right, so that's all from me today. Alex, I don't know what happened there, but sadly I didn't get any of those questions you told me you wanted to ask. So feel free to, well, you've already sent them through and I will do my best to answer them either just in a DM to yourself or in a future video, depending the nature of the questions. If it's any questions there that like make a good video, then I will use them. But for everyone else, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to seeing you again next Sunday. it's very difficult for me to say a time, because just like today, I had to look at my schedule and see when I had sort of half an hour free. But I'll do the same. I'll try and keep it sometime around, morning if you're like Atlantic time or Eastern time, or sort of midday if you're in the UK. And see you again next week. Please, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do, because there's so many different videos on the Rosset Bespoke YouTube channel. Everything from butler information, hospitality tricks, how to do silver service, things like that. But I also do some fun stuff. I review watches, I look at lifestyle things and stuff like that as well. So I'd be honored if you subscribe and check out some of my videos. I hope you enjoy them. Thanks very much. I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.